Bad decision.
Did she just outrun an explosion? That scene is just... What? Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the Series 7 Part B story, The Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS, written by Stephen Thompson and is directed by Matt King. Now this is a story which is based off the premise of the Doctor and his companion exploring the inner workings of the TARDIS. Now this is something that's actually been teased upon, something that a lot of fans have been wanting to see. However, throughout the series, due to maybe budgetary constraints, we've only had a glimpse of the interior workings of the TARDIS. Despite it supposedly being infinite, we only see a handful of rooms. Throughout the 60s, we sometimes get to see of a lavatory room, like a lounge. I think you see like a storage room at one point in the 60s. And then when we get into the 70s and 80s, the majority of it is corridors and bedrooms, with the only real exception being the fourth Doctor's venture, The Invasion of Time, where we do have a episode or two that is set entirely in the TARDIS. However, many people at the time were very underwhelmed by it, due to the fact that the inner workings of the TARDIS corridors were clearly shot in an abandoned building somewhere and had no real connections to what the TARDIS actually appeared to at the time. So this was a chance to get the concept right. Also as well, the title Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS is one of the longest titles in Doctor Who history. It's based off the 1867 novel Journey to the Centre of the Earth, in which characters go to the centre of the Earth, but here it's the centre of the TARDIS. And this is a story which is Matt King's first story directing. It's his only story he's directed, and Steve Thompson, he's written a few stories prior to this. However, Doctor Who wise, his stuff has been mainly criticised, especially stories like Curse of the Black Spot, and I actually can't remember off the top of my head what else he's written. He's done a few handful of stories, but he is mainly known for writing one of the worst and one of the best episodes of Sherlock, another TV show that was run by Stephen Moffat at the time. So, Stephen Moffat gave Stephen Thompson this script and this idea, and Steve Thompson, ran away with it. It became his episode. So, does the story live up to its hype? Does this story fulfill the fandom's dream of seeing the exterior TARDIS in a well-developed, well-explained story that makes you understand the TARDIS a bit more? Debatable. But let's get into the narrative at hand. Essentially, we start off with the Doctor basically training Clara to use the TARDIS. This is something he has actually done before with characters such as Tegan, Adric, Romana, I believe at one point. I want to say Leela did it at one point, and Sarah Jane. So it's not uncommon for companions to... and Donna Noble. Donna will also flew the TARDIS for a short period of time. So this is something that's not uncommon. But the story basically starts when a scavenger crew basically send a signal to capture the TARDIS into its force field, so they can salvage it, not realising that it's an actual ship. And what happens is during this time, the Doctor and Clara get separated. The Doctor somehow finds himself outside the TARDIS, and Clara finds herself in the inner corridors, the inner sanctum, shall we say, of the TARDIS interior. Now, this is actually something that's actually quite unique to this era of Doctor Who. You see, it's after, this is the story. This season was basically after it was established that the TARDIS was 100%, well not 100%, but at least conscious to some way or a form in the story, the Doctor's wife. And they basically tried to push the idea more with having this dynamic that the TARDIS doesn't like Clara, meaning that there's this very unique perspective, this very unique storyline that really only the TARDIS, only really Clara could be in. So in a plot sense, the story is unique because it's a story that only a Clara, it can only be a Clara that can tell this kind of story from a plot perspective. And essentially the TARDIS doesn't really like Clara being inside of her, and most of the shenanigans, most of the things that we see that happen are presumably because the TARDIS is trying to kill Clara to some way, shape or form. And outside the TARDIS, the Doctor befriends the scavengers, these two brothers, and this guy who is said to be an android. And the Doctor basically offers them, first of all, it's like, help me find Clara, and I promise you the ship, the salvage of a lifetime. But then when he gets into the TARDIS, he activates its self-destruct system and basically puts it on a timer, and it's like, right, we are going to find Clara, and if not, everyone here is going to die. Never trust a madman with a box. Now, let's get one thing, easily the best thing about the story. Matt Smith is really good in this story, and you've got some really great scenes where, like I like that bit where he basically threatens them with the timer, and he plays the Doctor so serious, not as quirky as the 11th Doctor usually is. However, you do get those flourishes, those little moments, like how when the Doctor, first these characters thinks they're unconscious, and then they turn around and they start whispering to each other, only for the Doctor to suddenly come up. He's like, it's a bit rude to whisper. Anyway, I'm the Doctor, nice to meet you, and have you seen Clara anywhere? Girl, so hi. So yeah, we've got this like quirky persona. However, the rest of the episode is so strange. I feel like that something went wrong from script to directing. I think something went wrong there. I don't know who to blame. I mean, a lot of people have criticised Stephen Thompson's writing previously, so maybe he's more the fault to blame. But stuff just doesn't quite add up. In just like small details as well. Essentially, the story takes place now in like two parts. We have Clara exploring the TARDIS from the interior, and then the Doctor and his crew basically going after her, trying to find her and a collective together, whilst the Doctor's trying to get these people to work together and work with him. And it depends really what you want to talk about. Let's talk about the Doctor and these crew members for a moment. Now, one of the worst thing about this story, and it's so boggling, but I say the worst thing, it's one of the worst things. What is up with the acting in this story? I don't want to blame one particular person because all three of them give this really wooden performances, and every line, every delivery is so awkward, and it's so, everybody just feels really uncomfortable and doesn't want to be there. And the script is just so, you don't like any of them. You don't like any of them. Especially when we get into the plots and twists of these characters and of these narratives. Essentially, there's these three characters. You got the leader, Gregor. We have Bram, and we have the cyborg Tricky, and essentially they basically pick on Tricky in a way, but it's like, oh yeah, you can't feel, they're an android, don't worry about it, kind of stuff. And you can kind of get the feeling of Tricky, he kind of feels like out of the group, out of the picture, in a sense. And so essentially he's the loner character of the crew, whilst Gregor, the leader, he essentially is only in there for profit. And when he goes into the TARDIS, he's basically scans for stuff, and he basically has an alternative motive on the TARDIS where Clara, when they're looking for the Clara, he's got this tracking device which accurately finds this strange tree-like thing inside the TARDIS that can basically make any machine, and he takes a part of it, and so the TARDIS actively goes against this crew and like blocking the walls and sending these creatures essentially after them in a sense, and sending them through these paradoxical walkways so that they keep like turning up in the same spot in a repeating motion. And like I'll give it to Matt King. He did a great job at giving these corridors feel generally different and unique. You never really feel claustrophobic. You never feel like, oh right, they're using the same set over and over and over and over and over again. You do generally feel like these characters are progressing, that these characters are moving in terms of their physical location. However, like I said, the main issue is the character and the acting. And like, they're so unlikable, especially Bram and Gregor. Essentially, they basically speak behind everyone's back is that they're going to take the equipment and they want the salvage, essentially. They don't really care about the Doctor and Clara in a sense. And I kind of get that, I kind of understand that. Though their plan makes no sense, because it seems like they know that the TARDIS will actively go against them. Why? And also, they are betraying the guy who, at the moment, they believe has the self-destruct, has the TARDIS on self-destruct. Why on hell would you tempt that? It's ridiculous. But a great scene at just how unbelievably dumb this story is. Essentially, Gregor sends Brem to go back to the console to find more stuff that they can salvage. To which Brem finds that there's this like stairway that goes down to this like engine that goes to the core, essentially to an engine room of sorts. And basically he gets his skin attached to this wire, and he gets knocked to the floor before one of these creatures that live within the TARDIS grabs him and seemingly kills him. Now, to put it up, right, these are brothers. And you kind of get the idea that, at least you should get the idea that this bond, that they care about each other. You know, they do the salvaging, and they've literally been living with all their lives. They're brothers, for crying out loud. At least co-workers. And the reaction from his death is so... Okay, so essentially, Tricky is like, he's dead, Brem is dead, we gotta go back for him. And Gregor is the one that's like, he's dead, forget about it. Without a single bit of an emotion response, as if he was a red shirt. Now, I'm sure, of course, at least in this part of the story, he is a red shirt. He was a non-developed character, mainly used to set up the stakes by killing him off. Yes, so he is a red shirt. However, in terms of context for the characters, it's his brother and their co-worker, and he has no care in the world, as if like he was just somebody like a complete stranger to them. It's so choppily written. It's so oddly structured, and this is also like we never really get a great feel of the character, because maybe he's this cold-blooded, only cares for himself kind of attitude. Maybe he had a dark past or something. But essentially later on, something happens with the core engines of the TARDIS, and pipes start breaking through the walls. One of these pipes stabs Trixie in the soldier, and basically Gregor basically has to make this decision, although he doesn't really, but basically in the context of the scene, he basically has to make the decision to cut off Trixie's arm off or leave him there. And he basically can't build up the courage to cut off his arm, despite Trixie believing that he's a cyborg and that, and he thinks, like, it's like, don't worry, it won't hurt, just cut it off. I'll be fine, I'll just get a new arm. And essentially the Doctor scans him and tells Trixie that apart from his eyes and his vocal box, he is completely human. And we essentially learn that he is actually the third brother, and that Grego and Brem, basically an accident happened to Trixie where he lost his memory, he lost his eyes, and he lost his voice box. And they described it as a prank, that it was like a harmless joke, but they made him believe he was a lifeless cyborg. What the hell? So unlikable, so... Like, well, what? How the hell am I supposed to feel for these characters? If they died, I would be glad. When Grego dies, I'm so glad he dies, because he's so... It was such a dumb moment. But anyway, going away from that for a moment, let's go from the other side of the story for the moment, as we talk about Clara. Clara, I will admit, it must be a difficult time for both Stephen Thompson, the writer, Matt King as director, and Jenna Louise Coleman as the actress, as the majority of these shots are basically Clara going around the TARDIS on her own, with the exceptions of these time zombies that go around chasing Clara. Now, the scenes that are shot here are so odd, and not in a good way. To give you an example, let me just go into detail of what happens in this moment. Clara goes looking around, and she sees this room, and there's this red light, and she's like, okay, what do I do? Do I open the door or not? But and then she decides to open the door. She opens the door, and as you've seen in the start of the video, I showed the clip, and she comes face to face with an explosion. She runs for it, and she's scot-free. She just casually runs away from a fiery inferno. What? And then we get the scenes where Clara's looking around in the TARDIS, and it's around here that we get introduced then to the first time zombie. And the structure of this scene is so shoddy. Essentially, Stephen Thompson wanted his cake and to eat it too. With essentially, he wanted his action piece with Clara and his time zombie to basically heighten the tension. But he also wanted Clara to explore the TARDIS and see these new vast rooms. So we get this really terrible chase scene where Clara kind of seems uninterested in the action. Essentially, she has come face to face with a zombie in the TARDIS. She's essentially learned that her friend, this innocent man, has been taking her through time and space. Her friend, through many adventures at this point in time, has zombie creatures that would kill on sight in his space-time vehicle. And this chase scene, she's kind of like lightly, almost laughing to herself, jogging away, as she's also like looking through the different doorways and looking. It's like, oh look, the library. Oh no way. A telescope. Oh look, that's cool. A swimming pool. Whilst at the same time she's getting chased by a time zombie. If Clara doesn't care about the action, if she doesn't find these zombies entirely threatening or engaging, why should the audience? But then this scene basically ends essentially with Clara escaping into one of the Doctor's many libraries. And we have then one of the controversial moments, because this story actually ties heavily with the story arc of Series 7B. and also as well, both facts. Both is in The Mystery of Clara, which we'll talk about later on. And then we get the name of the Doctor, the question, Doctor Who. Clara finds out what the Doctor's name is in this story. Not even a joke. And how she discovers it is one of the, if not the worst, horrible, stupidest ways imaginable. Now let's also put into context that this is part as well of the story arc of the Doctor Who. One of the biggest mysteries in the entire series. It's what the show is bloody named after. Who is the Doctor? It's a question that has been asked since the very start of the series back in An Earthly Child. It has been part of not one but two eras in the Doctor Who mythos, the 7th Doctor and the 11th Doctor, where the Doctor's name is this built up to be this mysterious, almost Lovecraftian kind of an idea, where if you know the Doctor's name, it will grant you some sort of power across the cosmos or something like that. Clara finds the Doctor's name by just casually scrolling through a book. Also, as I'm saying it out loud, I've just realised that most of the issues with Clara is that she just casually gets out of stuff into trouble. She casually escapes from an explosion. She casually runs away from a monster. She casually finds out one of the biggest secrets in the entire series. And no, I'm not joking, because at the end of that story, when she confronts about what that bit in the book is, she specifically refers to it as his name, and she doesn't even seem to find it a big deal. Only really, it's the Doctor's reaction to it. It's like, you should never say that name, because of the catastrophes that could happen with it and stuff. But yeah, Clara just found it in a book. That's what? It's so dumb. It's so extremely dumb. But anyway, halfway, about 2/3 into the story, the Doctor and Clara reunite, and essentially the Doctor is clearly keeping secrets from Clara as he, the time zombies. The Doctor seems to know what they are, and he seems to be very apologetic towards them. He sees them, he's like, I'm so sorry that this has happened to you. And Clara tries to act as like, no, you must not know. You cannot know what these creatures are. And so they basically go to explore into finding the inner workings of the TARDIS, as they basically discover that due to the crash at the TARDIS being caught in a salvage machine, the TARDIS's engines are about to self-destruct and kill everybody. So they have to basically make a detour to the TARDIS's engines to fix the TARDIS. So then you get a bit of stakes. Essentially then we learn, quite cleverly in my opinion, that the time zombies are actually our characters now, the Doctor, Clara, and the other crew members. And essentially, because time has gone wobbly at the moment, because the TARDIS is damaged, these time zombies are actually them from the future that have been horribly burnt and horribly decayed due to the effects of the Eye of Harmony, which actually makes its return appearance after last appearing, or at least a room that is connected to the Eye of Harmony within the TARDIS that was last seen in the TV movie. Basically, famously establishing that is canon, because in the classic series, the Eye of Harmony was actually just located on Gallifrey, and it was the TV movie that established that the Eye of Harmony was either in the TARDIS. They have a variation, they have a version of the TARDIS of it on the TARDIS, or they connect to the main Eye of Harmony that's on Gallifrey. The science of it doesn't really matter, but it's just an idea that came from the TV movie. So that's connecting it to a story that also does some really controversial things, like the Doctor being half human. So yeah, I actually do really like that twist, and it does also mean that Grego gets a horrible, decaying non-death, which I think the character completely deserves. But it doesn't feel like intentional. It's supposed to be like this tragic, oh, these people are getting, they're healing their old wounds and now they've turned into zombies just before they can fix everything. It's just like, no, I don't care about any of these people whatsoever. But essentially, when the Doctor and Clara get closer and closer, they basically find themselves into this room, which basically is this cliff. And the Doctor sees that there's no way out. So he confronts Clara. It's like, okay, now that's it. We're all dying, so you can just tell me what's happening. You can tell me who you are. I've seen you die twice in the asylum and the snowman. Who are you? And he actually kind of gets aggressive, kind of gets angry. And it kind of brought back memories of the Seventh Doctor and Ace, when it was essentially learned that the Doctor was using Ace as a pawn, and we have that scene where he basically tries to ruin Ace's faith in the Doctor. It's essentially something similar to that, only it's more the Doctor now revealing a sense that the reason he took her on board the TARDIS had very little to do with him actually liking Clara, but more that there's this big mystery. And this scene does become a bigger point later on in the series. However, its inclusion here is really questionable, because it seems like the scene was here mainly because we knew that this story was going to end on a reset button. Because essentially the story ends with this really gorgeous shot, scenery where the Doctor and Clara, they jump into the true engine of the TARDIS, and you've got like this debris that's like frozen in time and space. And the Doctor basically realised, in this really stupid cop-out ending, essentially the Doctor realises that earlier on in the story, Clara picks up this item that just seems to have fallen onto the floor, and it's really hot and it's made a mark on her hand. And when they get there, the wounds are sort of healed, and they've made a mark on on Clara's hand, saying the big important button or something like that. And essentially, this device, which is actually a relay for the scavenging ship, and essentially it turns it off. And so what the Doctor does is he opens a crack in time, which I guess kind of ties into Series 5, and later on in Time of the Doctor. And what he does is that he sends himself back in time to throw it so that Clara can pick it up. However, he even puts himself into it this time, and to basically tells the Doctor, his younger version, right, I'm you from the future, we need to fix the TARDIS, we need to press that button so that the scavenging ship can't take the TARDIS off course, and then none of the events happen. And the Doctor does, so that essentially rewrites the timeline so that none of it ever happened, and we see the three scavengers, crews, scavenging characters basically alive and well, as these events didn't happen to them. They've never met or seen the Doctor in this version of the timeline. Clara doesn't remember, but seemingly it's implied that the Doctor remembers these events, as he asks Clara, does she feel safe with him? And with Clara, it's just like, yes, of course, why wouldn't I be? So it implies that the Doctor at least has a feeling of those events, that he can feel the time is off, and this older version of the Doctor had this encounter of sorts. I don't know, but anyway, that is Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS, and it is horribly written. It is horribly acted, with the exception of Matt Smith and Jenna Louise Coleman. But even still, Jenna Louise Coleman doesn't really get much to do, and her performance really doesn't mix with what the scene is playing. But that could, again, I think that's more of a directing than Jenna Louise Coleman. Matt Smith is really the big standout, and the fact that we have a story that's more in delving into the TARDIS and the mythos of the time machine is something that I think was really cool, and I think it does make the story at least enjoyable to watch. However, if you want something that's like an actually good story, probably best to skip this one. So anyway, that's the Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS. So join me next time where we get reunited with Vastra, Jenny and Strax, the Patronopteran, as they are now introduced to modern day Clara, and they must discover a conspiracy, something to do with the Doctor and a mysterious creature that lives in with this blind woman, and the investigation goes forth into her mother's plan of building a new city. So join me next time for the Crimson Aura, and I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra!